Hello everyone, welcome to part 3 of What If Naruto Had a Shadow Guard. Anyways, enjoy. Naruto swung his legs absent-mindedly as he sat on a stool at Ichiraku picking at his second bowl of miso pork ramen. This was a rather strange occurrence to the Ichirakus, who watched the boy with mixed feelings of confusion and wariness. "Is everything alright, Naruto-kun?" asked I.M. tenderly. Naruto looked up from his bowl and sighed forlornly. "Yeah," he answered quietly. "I just have a lot on my mind, I.M. I.M. glanced at her father, Tucci, in concern. Tucci just shrugged. "If the boy says he's fine, I.M.-chan," said Tucci as he stirred a pot of broth. "Sometimes a man just needs to be left alone to think." I.M. rolled her eyes at her father's machismo. "Whatever, Dad," she huffed. I.M. turned back to Naruto, who watched the proceedings between father and daughter with an amused expression on his face. "If you ever need to talk, Naruto-kun," I.M. said consolingly, "know that I'll always be here, okay?" Naruto nodded and shot I.M. a grateful grin as he began to eat again, feeling slightly better. He felt bad that he worried the Ichirakus with his brooding. He was beginning to act like Sasuke. And speaking of the duck-haired brooder, the very same boy suddenly appeared and took a seat on the stool next to Naruto's and exhaled a heavy sigh. "What's up?" said Naruto, with a mouthful of noodles in his mouth. Sasuke regarded him with disgust. "Seriously?" Sasuke asked in repulsion. "Chew your food and swallow before you talk to me, you dope." Naruto chuckled and swallowed his mouthful of delectable noodles in one go. "My bad," Naruto said with a grin. "What's going on, Sasuke? I thought you were supposed to be practicing kunai throwing with Itachi this evening?" At the mention of Itachi's name, Sasuke's face darkened. "Yeah," Sasuke replied scathingly. "I was supposed to do that, but Itachi and I said that he couldn't today. He said he was busy." Naruto stopped eating and looked at his friend with a sympathetic look. He knew all too well what it felt like to be blown off by someone. "Well, look at it this way," Naruto said cheerfully. Sasuke turned to look at him curiously. "We can hang out, then. We can go to a deserted training ground and practice. I'll even show you some of the stuff Anko-sensei's been teaching me." Sasuke's gloomy expression melted away into a happy smile. "Yeah, okay. Sounds good." Naruto cheered and then grew serious as he faced his friend. "I just need to finish another 4 bowls, and we can go." Sasuke deadpanned at his friend in return. "Figures." Naruto just laughed and continued to eat his ramen with renewed vigor. From her perch atop a nearby building, Anko smiled at the exchange between Naruto and Sasuke. "Humph," Anko muttered. "Looks like nothing's amiss so far with the Uchiha brat." "It would seem so," said a new voice from behind Anko. If it weren't for the fact that Anko sensed the newcomer's arrival, she would have promptly tossed a kunai right into the intruder's face. "Nice of you to join me," added Anko with a smirk. "Weasel." The figure addressed as Weasel came into the dim light cast from the street lamp below the building and nodded at Anko in greeting. "Come to check up on your little brother, then?" Anko asked as she watched Naruto inhale a bowl of ramen with ill-disguised repulsion. Weasel nodded silently and replied, "Of course." Anko turned to face Weasel and observed how run-down he looked, even with his ANBU mask in place. Weasel was none other than Sasuke's elder brother, the famed prodigy, Itachi Uchiha, who joined the ANBU Corps at the age of 11, and was currently a recently promoted ANBU captain at the age of 13. He was quiet and aloof, but Anko knew him to be one of the most loyal shinobi of the Leaf she had ever known. "I guess life as an ANBU captain isn't all that it's made out to be, huh?" Anko asked with a smug smile. She couldn't tell because of Itachi's mask covering his face, but she was sure that he was giving her a smile in return. "Perhaps you're right," Itachi replied. I'd been rather busy the last few weeks. Anko knew not to press the subject, seeing that all ANBU missions were highly classified. Even if she was a Tokabetsa Jounin, she didn't even have clearance to discuss the matter. Oh well, Anko said, slapping the boy on the back. Hang in there, kiddo. Itachi shrugged her off and stood up. Keep an eye on my Ototo Anko-san, Itachi said as he made his way to the opposite side of the building and disappeared in a shunshin. Anko watched the spot where Itachi had vanished for a few moments before replying in a whisper. I would even if you didn't ask me. He means a lot to Naruto, which makes him mean a lot to me. Naruto and Sasuke finally found an empty training ground and made their way into it. Upon arriving in the middle of the clearing, Sasuke folded his arms and looked at Naruto expectantly. So, he said impatiently. Show me something cool, Naruto. Or are you just all talk? Naruto knew Sasuke was just teasing him, but the boy's smug attitude really pissed him off sometimes. Reaching into his kunai pouch on his left leg, Naruto withdrew 4 kunai and sent them flying at a nearby tree, where they all converged into a single point, making a tightly packed diamond shape. Naruto wiggled his eyebrows at Sasuke. Well? Naruto asked with a smug grin. Sasuke blinked and rolled his eyes. That's pretty good, Sasuke admitted. But Itachi and I could do that easily. Naruto huffed and went over to the tree to retrieve his kunai. Yeah, well, Itachi's a freak of nature when it comes to throwing weapons, Naruto retorted as he plucked a kunai from the bark of the tree. I can't compare to him. Sasuke laughed and walked over to help. Neither can I, to be honest, said Sasuke with a bit of bitterness as he ripped a kunai from the tree that was particularly stubborn about coming loose. But I hope someday to surpass him. Once all of the kunai were out, Naruto turned to look at Sasuke, who was brooding. Again, the two friends sat down against the trunk of the tree. So, did anything else happen in your clan when you went home after class today? Naruto asked. Sasuke was silent for a moment before he muttered. You know, the usual. Father and Itachi and I are still at odds with each other, and everyone else seems to be in a grumpy mood. At least, the other adults are. Mother told me that Nii-san and father are both under a lot of stress right now, but I know that there's something more going on. Naruto nodded, signaling for Sasuke to continue, which he did. I don't understand what's gotten into everyone in the clan, Sasuke sighed as he ran a hand through his jet black hair. Everyone seems so tense and moody. Naruto snickered. Maybe it's an Uchiha thing? Sasuke glared at Naruto, promptly shutting him up, although Naruto still managed to squeeze in a chuckle. I just wish things would go back to the way they used to be, Sasuke said quietly. Before all this tension started. When Itachi had time to hang out with me. Naruto made an indignant face. What? He exclaimed. I'm not good enough for you. I'm hurt. Sasuke rolled his eyes and chuckled. Shut up, dope, Sasuke replied. You're my best friend. This is family I'm talking about. It's different. Naruto's grin faded slightly and he looked at the ground bitterly. Well, I wouldn't know about all that. Naruto whispered forlornly. Sasuke seemed to realize that he hit a sore spot and promptly changed the subject. Hey Naruto, Sasuke said, nudging his friend's shoulder. Teach me how to do that throw you just did. I bet I can get it down faster than you. Naruto's grin came back just as quickly as it had faded and he shot Sasuke a look of challenge. Sure. Naruto beamed. But, I warn you, only the best ninja can make it work. Sasuke laughed and stood up, offering Naruto a hand up as he did so. So that means that you can't make it work, then. Naruto puffed up his cheeks. That was a low blow, Sasuke. The two friends laughed and began to practice in earnest, unaware of the third figure that watched them with a warm smile, only to flee into the shadows soon after.
Danzo Shimura was in an excellent mood. After his talk with Sarutobi, he felt as if things were finally working in his favor. The old fool was completely caught unawares that Uzumaki knew about his tenant, and had conversed with the beast on numerous occasions. The look on Sarutobi's face as Danzo told him so was priceless. Now, Sarutobi would confront the young boy and their bond would become strained, just as Danzo planned. It would make approaching the boy that much easier. The news that Naruto Uzumaki was aware of the Kyuubi was also a boon for Danzo. This meant that Sarutobi would need to find some way to begin training the boy and tapping into the Bijuu's power, something that only he, Danzo, could do. The fool would have no choice but to hand over Naruto to him, or risk the boy going out of control if the Kyuubi's power ever made its way to the surface. Essentially, the whole situation was a win-win for the mummified man. Danzo nodded curtly at his two root guards as he approached the door to his home. They said nothing as he passed them, as they should. Danzo trained them to only speak when spoken to, and not to engage in idle chit-chat. He had seen firsthand what guards would turn into if they spent their time casually conversing. Konoha's two eternal chunin, Izumo and Kotetsu, were perfect examples of shinobi without proper discipline. Closing and locking his door as he entered his home, Danzo made his way to his bedroom to retire for the night. He had also discussed with Sarutobi about the looming threat of the Uchiha clan's possible uprising, and the steps that should be taken to quell it. Sarutobi preached diplomacy, but Danzo expected as much. If he was in charge, he would simply strike the Uchiha down to remind them of their place. They were loyal shinobi of the village. No more no less, regardless of what gifts were afforded them by their Kekkei Genkai. He had quietly confirmed that if Sarutobi decided to let the Uchiha fester in their displeasure until they acted out, he would personally see to it that order was restored, diplomacy be damned. Danzo was so caught up in his thoughts that he didn't notice the presence of an intruder until he was inside of his bedroom. He quickly withdrew a kunai and flung it at blinding speed in the direction of the chakra signature, only to widen his visible eye in shock as his kunai was snatched out of the air like it was nothing. Now Danzo, said a raspy voice. Is that any way to greet someone? Danzo quickly schooled his surprise into a stoic expression and gathered himself. Who are you? Danzo demanded. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't call my guards in here to deal with you. The figure laughed coldly and stepped out of the shadows to reveal a figure cloaked in black robes, with a blank white mask. Danzo watched in awe as the figure turned the kunai that was thrown into dust. Danzo was eerily reminded of his own root shinobi when he gazed upon the mysterious figure's form, but quickly dismissed the thought. He knew from all of his years of experience how powerful this person was. They simply radiated power. That piqued his interest immensely. He would have to go about this exchange very carefully. You would be foolish to call your guards, answered the masked figure. I can't be defeated by them. They would only die in their feeble attempt. Danzo knew the figure wasn't bluffing. He also knew that he wasn't a match for this person. He wasn't sure Sarutobi himself could take them on in a head-to-head battle. The figure took a seat on Danzo's bed casually, as if it owned the place. Gloomy home you got here, Danzo, the figure said in a bored tone. Ever think of brightening up the place? Danzo said nothing as he observed the figure. He braced himself and spoke once more. Who are you? The figure stopped its observation of the room and fixed its gaze on him. Who I am is not important. It said simply. What I want, however, is. Danzo tried to rein in his irritation at being scorned and replied. What is it that you want, then? The figure stood up from the bed and began to pace around the room leisurely. I want you to stop your foolish pursuit of my quarry. The figure said. I believe you know of whom I speak of. Danzo clenched his jaw in anger. Who did this person think they were? You are talking about the Jinchuriki. Danzo growled lowly. The figure stopped and nodded. Indeed, it said. I know you, Danzo Shimura. I know what drives you, what you wish for with all of your very being. I do not hold any of that against you, but... Danzo's eye widened as he was lifted off the ground, a skeletal hand grasping him around the throat. I am the only person who will have Naruto Uzumaki. He is mine to pursue and capture. If you interfere with this, you will be removed. Do you understand? Danzo couldn't be sure if his lack of breath was coming from the fact that it was being choked out of him or if it was a result of the overwhelming killing intent flooding from the masked figure before him. I understand. Choked out Danzo weakly. The skeletal hand dropped him unceremoniously to the floor, where he landed in a heap. Good. Was all the masked figure said. There was silence, only permeated by the scuffling sounds made as Danzo clambered to his feet awkwardly. The figure turned to fix its gaze on him once more. Also, it added. Drop any ideas you might have about the Uchiha problem. I'm currently taking care of things in that sector as well. Interfere with that, and I will kill you and your root faster than you can plot another one of your feeble schemes. Danzo's visible eye widened again. Just who was this person? Your surprise speaks volumes, commented the figure with a cruel chuckle. Farewell, Danzo Shimura. Pray that we do not meet again. And with a swirl of shadow, the masked figure vanished from the room, leaving a panting Danzo in its wake. Danzo's two root guards quickly barged into the room and quickly ran to their master's aid. Lord Danzo, said the root shinobi on the right of him. Are you all right? What happened? Danzo waved the two guards off as he slowly collected himself. His carefully laid plans were all but ruined, simply by one person's interference. Of course, Danzo could easily continue trying to make them work, but something in the masked figure's warning made him positive that continuing on his current course would end in disaster. He needed a new plan. New plans. Plans that would take the mysterious stranger's place on the playing field into account. First, he needed to find the common denominator between the two of their agendas. He found the answer to be blatantly obvious. Naruto Uzumaki. Yes, all of this somehow revolved around the young Uzumaki. For one reason or another, the masked figure was immensely interested in the boy. Whether or not it was for the same reasons as him was suspect, but there was no denying that the boy was key. Danzo needed some way to keep tabs on him. Placing a root spy to tail the boy was out. Now that the insufferable fool Sarutobi was made aware that Uzumaki knew of the Kyuubi sealed within him, the boy would have ANBU guards tailing him now anyways. Not to mention the boy's accursed sensei, Anko Mitarashi, would most likely be shadowing him to make sure he was safe. No, Danzo needed a more subtle option, a way to watch the boy without arousing suspicion. And then, an idea struck him. Danzo turned to his two guards. How many of our operatives are young enough to masquerade as an academy student? Danzo asked the two. The two guards looked at one another for a moment before the one on the left replied. There are only two that fit your query, my lord. Although. Danzo's eye narrowed. Although, what? He hissed dangerously. The other guard spoke up in his partner's hesitance. One of them is currently indisposed as of the moment, my lord. Danzo nodded. He knew who the two guards were talking about. Send word to the other one then that I have a long-term mission for them. It is of the utmost importance. Go! The two shinobi vanished via Shunshin, leaving Danzo alone in his bedroom with his thoughts. Danzo made his way to his bed and sat down. I'll need to be extra careful from now on concerning the boy, Danzo whispered to himself. Especially now that he has so many eyes watching out for him. Danzo smirked crookedly and chuckled. Let the chase begin, I suppose. Their home was lost to them, there was nothing else for it. Join the new cause, or flee, that was their only option at the time. So naturally, they took what they could carry on their persons and fled. The flight from their ancestral home was not easy. Their pursuers were relentless and brutal. Already almost all of their kinsmen were dead, or captured. But there was no time for mourning, there was only time for escape. So on they fled, to the south,
where they would be free from their captors and would-be executioners if they resisted. But it was difficult. They had so little time to stop to eat and drink, and their supplies was laughable. Every time they thought they were in the clear to lay down to rest, they were forced to get up and start running again. The situation was quickly becoming hopeless. But they would not give up after coming so far. After what seemed like hours of running, they stopped at a large waterfall flanked on either side by two colossal statues of Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju. The Valley of the End. They had made it to the border at last. The two of them sat down on the bank of the river, eager to catch their breath, but aware that they might have to move again at any moment. They were one man and a young girl. The man was large and stocky, with dark brown hair that hung down to his shoulders, and gray eyes. He had a pronounced scar that ran down the left side of his face, giving him a frightening visage. He was donned in simple clothing, a gray tunic, with mesh armor underneath, black pants and matching sandals. He carried a large zanbatu on his back that was ornately decorated along its blade with depictions of dragons spewing flames. The young girl had fiery orange hair that hung down to her mid-back, and wore a blue cap on her head. Her eyes were the same shade of gray as the man's. She wore a similar outfit to the man's as well, minus the zanbatu strapped to his back. In place of that, she had two kunai pouches strapped to either side of her legs. Both looked completely exhausted and defeated. The man turned to the younger girl and smiled tiredly. "We're almost there, my daughter," he huffed. "All we have to do is cross this river, and we'll be free." The young girl beamed at her father in obvious relief. "Good," she replied. "Anywhere is better than where we left from." There was a look of sadness that crossed the man's face as his daughter said this, and he looked at the ground. "Our home used to be a beautiful place, daughter," he sighed, as he tossed a pebble on the bank into the raging river. "At least, it was until showed up." The young girl frowned as she noticed how stricken with pain her father looked as he said that, and regretted her earlier comment. "I'm sorry, father," the girl began. "It's just that dash." "There they are!" cried a shrill voice. "By the river. Don't let them cross." The man shot up with surprising agility and yanked his daughter to her feet. "Climb on my back and hold on tight," he commanded. "We have to cross the river, now." The girl nodded in fright and quickly hopped onto her father's back, and the two of them made for the raging waters of the river before them. Several shuriken and kunai shot out from behind them, narrowly missing the duo as they made their way onto the river, the man using chakra to walk across the tempestuous water's surface. They were about halfway across when another volley of kunai and shuriken flew at them, and several found their mark on the man's body, and he fell to one knee. "Father," cried the girl in horror. The man staggered up to his feet and continued to trudge across the river, albeit more slowly. Suddenly a voice called out to them. "Give it up, old man," it cried. A group of shinobi stepped out from the woods where the man and his daughter had just been sitting, weapons raised. They all wore similar outfits, ragged cloaks, with face masks covering their lower faces. They all exuded the same aura of malice and satisfaction that they had finally caught up to and cornered their quarry at last. The person who had spoken stood on the bank of the river, arms crossed. "Give it up right now, and we won't kill you and your daughter," he bellowed. The man and his daughter paid them no heed and continued to trek across the roaring river. The masked assailant growled in anger at his command being ignored. "Fine. Die then," he roared as he ordered his men to ready their weapons for a third and lethal volley. "Father!" cried the young girl. "Please, you're injured. We have to turn back." The man was obviously on his last dregs of energy, but he had a fire in his eyes that refused to dim just yet. "No, my daughter," he yelled, over the sound of the rushing water. "I promised you that we would be free. And if I have to die to ensure that you never have to go back to the hell that we escaped from, so be it." With a mighty grunt of effort, the man adjusted his daughter from his back into his arms and prepared to toss her to the other side of the river, knowing that once she landed on the soil, she would be safe from their pursuers for good.
The fools wouldn't dare cross into foreign soil.
The young girl struggled in her father's grasp to no avail, tears streaming down her cheeks.
No! She cried. You can't, father. Please. Come with me. The shinobi on the other side of the river waited for their orders.
Fire, hollered the lead shinobi, and the hunters threw their kunai with deadly precision right into the back of the man, who fell to both knees in pain.
Father!
The girl screamed. The man grinned, with blood dripping down from his mouth in copious amounts, and hefted the young girl and tossed her, where she landed in a heap, but uninjured on the other bank opposite the pursuing shinobi.
Live my daughter!
The man cried, tears of his own running down his cheeks as he began to slowly sink into the water. His chakra was fading, and he did not have enough left to sustain his balance on the surface of the river.
Live and rebuild, or once proud clan. Live a full, free life. And know this.
The girl wiped her eyes as she watched the last member of her family, her father whom she had loved with all of her heart, speak his final words.
Know that, I love you. Now and always.
With his final message said, the man allowed himself to sink fully into the rushing waters of the river. It was all the young girl could do not to jump in after him to try and save him, but even as the thought crossed her anguished mind, she knew that he was gone. Gone forever. The lead shinobi on the other bank of the river held up a hand to stop his men from going after the girl, as some of them were already starting across the water.
Stop! He commanded. That's foreign soil. As much as I hate to admit it, the old man was right. The girl is safe, for now.
The other shinobi looked from their leader to the girl and quickly jumped back to the side of the river from whence they came.
But know this, girl, snarled the lead shinobi. I'm letting you live.
I could simply have my men throw a kunai right between your eyes and snuff out your insignificant life, just like your foolish fathers. The girl's tear-filled eyes gleamed with hatred. But, chances are the shinobi on your side will kill you anyway, he continued with a cold chuckle.
Be grateful, brat. And hear the name of your pathetic father's hunter and your savior, Enigumo. And with that, all of the shinobi and Enigumo himself vanished in a burst of speed, back into the forest.
The young girl dragged herself through the forest several hours later, hungry, tired, and grief-stricken. She had lost everything dear to her, and the only thing she had to show for it was the fact that she was alive and free from her pursuers. She would have been content to perish with her father back at the river, simply because she couldn't stand being alone. She felt so hollow. The only things she felt at the moment were sorrow and anger. Anger that was slowly coalescing into pure hatred. Hatred for the man that pursued her and her father across their homeland, and who took her father away from her, when they were both so close to freedom.
Enigumo.
She swore that if she ever ran into that man again, she would kill him. She would see him suffer a fate worse than death. She stumbled on a tree root and tumbled onto the ground, not even bothering to pick herself up and continue walking. She simply lay there, too exhausted to move, too exhausted to care about moving forward. Fat tears ran down her cheeks, soaking the forest soil as she wept for her father, wept for the fact that she had no idea what to do or where to go now. She had no idea how long she laid on the ground until she heard voices in the distance, and wearily picked her head up to try and ascertain where they were coming from. Then she saw them. A group of shinobi, which made her flinch. She soon relaxed when they came into better focus. They did not seem to be anything like the shinobi that had chased her earlier, and for some reason she felt completely at ease with their increasing proximity. She placed her head back on the ground and feigned sleep. Perhaps they would think she was dead? A naive thought, but she didn't think she had the strength to stand up anymore nor think of a more fleshed-out idea. Finally, she heard the sound of muffled footsteps as the squad of shinobi stopped and examined her. She felt someone feel her neck for a pulse, and upon confirming that she was still alive, holler something at another shinobi nearby. She felt her body being picked up gingerly, and felt the weightlessness that she associated with high-speed travel. They must be tree-hopping then. As she began to drift off, from exhaustion, she could hear snippets of the shinobi's conversation. Where do you think she came from? One asked.
probably a refugee from the north. Things have been getting real ugly up there lately. Another replied. What should we do with her? It's obvious that she needs medical attention. Should we find a nearby village to drop her off? Yet another voice questioned, this one female. No, answered another voice. This one was male, and much deeper than the others. She has kunai pouches on her. She must be a shinobi in training who fled from the north. I say we take her back to the village and let the Hokage decide what to do with her. The young girl's head was swimming with questions as she began to nod off. Where are they taking me? She wondered. Who is the Hokage? She got her answer from the female voice, who replied curtly. Fine then. Let's head back to Konoha. Deep within the forests of Hinokuni, a figure materialized as if out of thin air, and promptly fell to one knee, panting heavily. Just as suddenly, a second figure materialized, in the form of a humanoid shadow, that promptly knelt down to the side of the exhausted figure. Master, said the apparition. Are you all right? The figure stood up shakily and waved the shadow off dismissively. What to do with her? I am tired, was the figure's reply. The figure reached up and removed the blank white mask it used to conceal its identity. The subservient shadow nearby said nothing as it watched its master place a skeletal hand upon their forehead and sigh. It will take some time for me to recover enough energy to interfere with Konoha and resume my plans for Naruto Uzumaki. The figure turned to his shadowy servant and scowled. Can you please change into something that's not an eyesore to look at? I've been traveling via shadow all day, I don't want to look at another one for a while. The shadow chuckled with mirth and replied. But of course, master, it hissed. But as of the moment, I only have the chakra that I stole from that woman, so I'll have to assume her form. The figure waved a hand dismissively. Snippets of the shinobi's conversation. I don't care, do it. The shadow began to reconfigure and elongate until in its former place stood the likeness of Anko Mitarashi. Is this better, master? Shadow Anko purred seductively, striking a pose. The figure said nothing as it strode over to a nearby rock and sat against it, breathing deeply. Is everything in place for our most recent plan? The figure asked. Shadow Anko made a pouting face, but answered. But of course, master, she replied. I haven't ever let you down before, have I? The figure laughed. This is true, it laughed. You have been most faithful and efficient. Shadow Anko took a mock bow at the praise. Things are going to change, as our friends in Konoha will soon see, the figure said darkly. I wonder how Naruto-kun will react to our little gift. Shadow Anko's eyes glinted with ill-disguised mirth. Indeed, she replied. It will be most interesting, master. The figure took a long breath and stood up, placing its mask back on as it did so. Let's move on, it said. We have other plans to put into motion. I will have to recover for a time, but the time to strike is coming soon. And with that, Shadow Anko morphed back into a shadowy apparition, and the masked figure and shadow servant disappeared in a swirl of darkness. Sarutobi sat in his office, head on his desk, in complete exhaustion. There was simply too much going on currently for him to handle. Just when he thought nothing could surprise him further, his rival Danzo had imparted the knowledge that Naruto Uzumaki was aware of his burden. As if that wasn't enough, his inside agent spying on the Uchiha clan had reported some very troubling news. And to top it all off, a squad that was stationed in the northern sector of Hinokuni reported back with a most interesting report. While doing border patrol, they had stumbled upon a young kunoichi in training, most likely a fleeing refugee from the land of rice, and brought her back to the village. The girl was currently resting in the hospital, so Sarutobi would have to wait to question her to decide what to do with her. It was all giving Sarutobi one massive headache, and he didn't think he could handle any more bad news. He thought about the warning Naruto's shadow had given the young boy, things will be changing very soon. Was this what he meant?
Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and in came two people Sarutobi was hoping to avoid, his old teammates, now his advisors as Hokage, Hamura Midakato and Koharu Yutatane. Hamura had gray hair, a beard, and glasses that covered sharp, intelligent dark eyes. The man always had a constant frown on his face, as if nothing in the world could ever make him smile.
It was probably true.
The man could look at a picture book of kittens playing and still frown.
He was garbed in similar robes as Sarutobi.
Hamura was stern, calculating, and straightforward, but always had the village's best interests at heart, even if Sarutobi disagreed with him often. Koharu also had gray hair, that was pulled back into a bun that was fastened with two hairpins. She always squinted her eyes, which made Sarutobi wonder if she frequently ran into walls. She was also donned in the same clothing as her counterpart, Hamura. Koharu used to be very vibrant and full of life, but after the attack by the Ninetails she took to a more reserved and catty demeanor, which Sarutobi detested.
The two advisors walked into the office and took seats in front of Sarutobi's desk.
Sarutobi locked eyes with them and mentally prepared himself for the diatribe that was surely coming in. 3, 2.
Hiruzen, barked Koharu. We need to talk. Sarutobi blinked. He didn't even get to one.
About what exactly, Koharu? Sarutobi replied lazily.
As you very well know, there are many things to talk about these days.
Such as the weather, and whether Guide will finally break Kakashi's winning streak in their annual challenges. Be serious, Hiruzen, added Hamura, who looked at him sharply.
Sarutobi sighed, adjusted his hat, and folded his hands on the desk.
Very well, Sarutobi said.
What is it? Koharu huffed indignantly. What do you plan to do about the Uchiha? The situation is spiraling out of control.
Fugakadano refuses to meet with you anymore, and we fear that this rebellion of theirs could happen any day now.
Hamura nodded his agreement.
Sarutobi leaned back in his chair. I am aware of the severity of the situation, you too, Sarutobi explained.
But, I will not resort to force unless the Uchiha do something to merit it. Then you are simply going to let them rebel? Shouted Koharu in outrage.
Sarutobi shook his head and glared at her, making her shrink back a bit.
I have ANBU stationed around the Uchiha district, Sarutobi continued. If they so much as lift a kunai against us, my ANBU are ordered to detain any aggressors. Koharu calmed down after hearing this, and Hamura spoke up next.
That is good, Hiruzen, he replied flatly.
But what if the Uchiha stage an attack in the village proper? You can't possibly have the ANBU tail each Uchiha individually. Sarutobi nodded his understanding at Hamura's point.
That is true, Sarutobi answered.
But, my informant, Weasel, has been giving me bi-daily updates about the Uchiha clan's behavior.
Not to mention, he is currently watching the more troublesome members of the clan very carefully.
We will know if the Uchiha plan to move before they actually do. Both advisors visibly relaxed at Sarutobi's point.
Shortly after, Koharu leaned forward.
We should still advise all shinobi to be on alert.
It's better to be safe than sorry, Hiruzen.
Sarutobi sighed and shook his head again.
I believe doing that would only tip the Uchiha off that we're onto them, he argued.
I will inform Jounin that I trust, if that will suffice. Both advisors looked uncertainly at one another before they nodded.
Very good, finished Sarutobi.
Is there anything else? Hamura cleared his throat before speaking. What is the status of the refugee girl in the hospital? Has she awoken yet? Sarutobi shook his head. Not yet, he replied. I'm to be alerted the moment she does.
Hamura nodded and stood up, Koharu following after, albeit hesitantly. Sarutobi assumed that the old woman still wanted to grill him about the Uchiha matter. We expect to be told what you plan to do if things devolve further with the Uchiha clan, Hiruzen. Hamura said sternly. After all, it does concern the village.
Sarutobi nodded, as the two advisors made their way towards the door. When their backs were turned, Sarutobi let out a sigh of relief. That wasn't as irritating as I thought it would be, he thought. Suddenly, Kohara wheeled around, and Sarutobi quickly schooled his relieved expression. Yes, Koharo? Sarutobi asked him passively. The woman marched over to his desk and placed both hands on it, scowling deeply. I just remembered. Koharu began in a dark tone, which made Sarutobi begin to panic internally. He prayed that she wasn't about to bring up what he thought she was. Danzo told us some interesting news about our resident Jinchuriki. Sarutobi scowled back. Kamidam you, Danzo. He cursed mentally. Sarutobi stood up as well and slammed his hands on his desk, momentarily startling both advisors. Our Jinchuriki has a name, Sarutobi snarled dangerously. It's Naruto Uzumaki. I will not have him referred to like some inanimate object or beast. Koharu took a moment to get over her shock at being yelled at and continued, albeit in a more subdued tone. Danzo tells us that Uzumaki-san has been aware of his status for over a year now. Did you know this? If so, why did you not think it prudent to inform us? This is a matter of village security. Sarutobi clenched his jaw in irritation. If he saw Danzo again, he was going to kick that old fossil so hard in the... Well, Hiruzen? Interrupted Hamura, who was regarding him expectantly. Sarutobi sighed and sat back down in his chair. I was also unaware of this matter until Danzo told me, Sarutobi explained, somewhat bitterly. How he discovered this, I do not know, but I will have to have Naruto-kun watched more closely. Koharu sniffed indignantly. You propose to just have the boy watched? She spat. Hiruzen. For all we know, the Kyuubi could be influencing him. For all we know, it might try and break free, or even attempt to take over the boy. Hiruzen shot to his feet and unleashed a powerful wave of killing intent that sent the two advisors to their knees. Listen here. He hissed in outrage. Weren't you two ninja? Were you not on my squad with me as children? Surely you are well versed in Fuinjutsu. You know just as well as I do that the fourth made Naruto's seal in such a way that the nonsense you are spewing cannot happen. Hamura, who was beginning to sweat from the sheer intensity of Sarutobi's ki, stammered. But, Hiruzen, we can't take a risk of the D-demon getting any kind of sway over the boy. Why you must. Sarutobi increased the amount of killing intent he was emitting, and Hamura quickly shut up. I must. Sarutobi roared. Even Sarutobi's hidden ANBU guards shook in their camouflaged positions from his rage. They had never seen their leader so angry. I am Hokage of this village, whereas you are not. I will decide how to proceed with how it is run. Now get out of here before I make you two leave. The two advisors did not need any more incentive. They quickly scrambled to their feet and hobbled out of the room as fast as they possibly could. Sarutobi cut of his ki and took a series of steadying breaths before sitting down in his chair. Said Bor, one of Sarutobi's ANBU guards, from his hidden location near the bookcase. Are you all right, sir? Sarutobi sighed and began to pack his pipe. Yes, I am now, he said. Thank you, Bor. The fact of the matter, however, was that Sarutobi was far from all right. He had yet to meet and talk with Naruto about his knowledge of the Kyuubi. He had told Anko just yesterday that it was imperative that Naruto not know about his burden yet, only to find out later that the boy already knew. It was maddening. What hurt him more was the fact that Naruto didn't come to him when he found out. It made him worry. He had not wanted Naruto to find out about his status as a Jinchuriki from anyone other than him. It also raised the question of how the boy found out. Sarutobi took another deep breath and sighed. He would have to wait and ask Naruto all of these things when he got a chance. With the Uchiha problem becoming more prominent, however, he wasn't sure of when that would be. He was shaken out of his thoughts when his door was suddenly thrown open, to reveal Kimiko, who looked anxious. Lord Hokage. Kimiko stammered. The hospital just contacted me. The girl is awake now. Saratobi's eyes widened and he quickly got up from his desk and began to stride over to her.
"Cancel my morning appointments, Kimiko-chan," he said.
Kimiko nodded and stood aside so Saratobi could walk out the office door.
Saratobi quickly made his way out of the Hokage Tower and towards the hospital, curiosity brimming at what he would find out from the young girl who he was currently heading to meet with. Curiosity was the last thing on the mind of one Naruto Uzumaki as he sat in his class at the academy. Irika was giving a lesson on ninja tactics, again, and Naruto just couldn't be bothered to listen. He had covered almost all of what Irika was lecturing on with Anko-sensei ages ago.
He sighed despondently. Why couldn't they just start doing practical ninja exercises, instead of all of this boring academic work?
Naruto was positive that in the history of shinobi there was never a battle where the outcome was decided by who got the highest marks on a test.
He glanced over at Sasuke, who was diligently paying attention. Suck up, Naruto thought irritably.
Sasuke knew just as much, if not a tad less than he did about the subject, but there he was, paying attention like it actually mattered.
Naruto, shouted Irika, snapping the boy out of his thoughts. Naruto turned his head to face his sensei. Are you even listening? Irika continued. When Irika saw Naruto nod, he smirked. What are we talking about then? He asked. Naruto quickly glanced at Sasuke, who stared back at him.
Sasuke mouthed an answer for Naruto to give, and Naruto gave Sasuke a subtle thumbs up and thanks.
We're talking about tactics? Naruto replied as confidently as he could.
The whole class burst out in laughter, Kiba being the most obnoxious about it, and Naruto looked around in confusion.
Was he wrong? Irika sighed and shook his head.
We are talking about tactics, in general, he admonished.
But I meant which particular one. You'd know if you would pay attention.
I suggest you do so, Naruto.
Yeah, idiot, added Kiba, who turned around in his seat a few tables down and laughed.
Naruto growled at him and Kiba simply gave him a smug look in response.
Irika ordered the class to settle down and went back to his lecture. Naruto wheeled on Sasuke and hissed. Hey, thanks a lot, you prick.
Sasuke raised an eyebrow and smirked.
That's what you get for not paying attention, dope.
Naruto mumbled some choice curses at Sasuke and focused his attention on Irika, who was now telling the class about diversionary tactics. Yet another thing Naruto was already well versed in. Naruto made sure to look like he was paying attention this time as he went back to his own thoughts. Yesterday at the training field, Naruto and Sasuke's training was cut short when Itachi showed up and told Sasuke that he needed to come home. Sasuke had been stubborn at first, but the look in Itachi's eyes when he had said it left no room for argument, and he promptly followed his brother, leaving Naruto alone and confused. He wasn't sure what the whole situation was about, but he assumed it couldn't have been all that bad, seeing that Sasuke didn't look troubled by anything today. He wanted to ask his friend about it, but didn't want to seem like he was prying too much into his business. He decided that he wouldn't say anything to Sasuke unless he brought it up first. Everything was just becoming so muddled all of a sudden in Naruto's life. Before his shadow came along, things were so much simpler, albeit more depressing and lonely. He didn't regret anything that had happened to him lately, in fact, he wouldn't trade it for all the ramen in the world. But he didn't know what he was supposed to do now. He wanted to do something to help Sasuke and his family, he just didn't know what he could do. He also wanted to figure out what his shadow meant when he said that things were going to change. That was really driving Naruto crazy. Things changed all the time. However, Naruto knew that his shadow must be talking about a big change, something that would be really obvious. Also, the shadow had said soon. That meant whatever was going to happen would happen, or could happen any time now. That made him nervous. For all he knew, the change could be happening while he sat where he was thinking about it. Naruto ran a hand through his hair and sighed. He looked up to see Irika glaring at him again. What? I'm paying attention, Naruto shouted. Irika shook his head and pointed at the classroom, where the other students were getting up to break for lunch.
Naruto flushed pink in embarrassment and turned when he heard chuckling from nearby. He looked over to see Sasuke, who was standing up, rolling his eyes. "I thought it would be funny to see how long you were going to sit there and brood for," Sasuke informed him. Naruto sneered. "Oh, that's really funny coming from the king of brooders," Naruto retorted. Sasuke shrugged and began to make his way down the stairs of the classroom towards the door. He started to walk faster as he noticed that he was, as usual, being closely followed by his horde of fangirls. Naruto chuckled. "Serves you right," he called after him. "That's what you get for telling me the wrong answer." Naruto sat on a tree branch, giving him a great view of the academy's lawn, where the students ate lunch. He had packed his own lunch, which he had gotten used to doing, and ate a sandwich as he watched Sasuke try to shrug off yet another love-struck girl. He chuckled as he took a bite from his food. His observation of Sasuke's predicament was interrupted when he heard someone call his name. "Hey Naruto." Naruto glanced down to see Kiba, standing below the tree, arms crossed, and with a cocky smirk on his face. Naruto sighed. "What do you want, Kiba?" Naruto asked tiredly. Kiba just grinned wider. "Come down here and I'll tell you." Naruto rolled his eyes and went back to eating his sandwich. Ever since their first day at the academy, Kiba insisted on trying to prove that he was the alpha male as he described it. That meant anyone he thought could pose a threat to his claim on the title had to be shown their place, and for some reason, Naruto was on his list. Kiba had tried to do this with Sasuke, and the Uchiha had beaten him soundly. So, since Kiba couldn't topple Sasuke yet, he put all of his effort into trying to pick fights with Naruto, who promptly refused. Anko had told him that he wasn't allowed to fight anyone unless it was part of a class. Which really sucked. Naruto would have loved to knock Kiba down a peg or two, but he'd rather put up with Kiba's incessant antagonism over getting in trouble with his sensei. "Hey," barked Kiba. "Don't ignore me, loser." Naruto continued to eat, feigning obliviousness of Kiba's shouts. Kiba attempted to climb the tree, but couldn't figure out a way to scale it. "How'd you even get up there, anyway?" Kiba asked in bewilderment. "What are you? Some kind of monkey?" Naruto continued to ignore Kiba, but couldn't suppress a smirk at the boy's comment. The fact of the matter was, Naruto had scaled the tree using a chakra exercise he had just recently gotten down from Anko. She had called it the tree climbing technique. What the practitioner had to do was focus a fixed amount of chakra to their feet, and use that to scale the tree. If the chakra was too weak, you'd lose your footing on the surface and fall off. If it was too strong, which was Naruto's major problem at first, the user would be pushed off from the tree, creating a fracture on the surface around the point of contact. Naruto was told by Anko that because of Kurama and his own large chakra reserves, he would have a lot of trouble learning the technique. And she was right. It took Naruto the better part of a month and a half to get it. Naruto was ecstatic when he finally got it down, as it was the first real ninja technique he had learned. Anko had also sweetened his victory by informing him that the tree climbing technique was something that academy students didn't usually learn until they were full-fledged genin. Just the mere fact that Naruto, who was only 7, had learned it put him leaps and bounds beyond his classmates. And if that wasn't great enough, Naruto found that it could be utilized to escape people who irritated him. Case in point, Kiba. Speaking of the feral boy, he continued to hurl insults and challenges at Naruto for another few minutes before he got bored and stalked away, probably to go pick a fight with someone else. Seeing that the coast was clear, Naruto gathered up his garbage and casually walked down the tree and hopped to the ground. "Wow!" said a voice. "That was pretty impressive." Naruto turned to see Ino Yamanaka, in all her glory, smiling at him. Naruto groaned internally. While he had nothing against the girl, her personality was a bit too forward for him, and that was really saying something. When Naruto had told Sasuke this, Sasuke had retorted with something along the lines of, "That's the kunai calling the ninjato sharp." Ino was usually chasing after Sasuke with the other girls, but sometimes she would come find Naruto and try and flirt with him.
Naruto didn't know a thing about girls, but he definitely knew that he didn't want anything to do with their lovey-dovey nonsense.
Gross. What's going on, Ino? Naruto said casually, trying not to make it look too obvious that he wasn't exactly eager to chit-chat. Ino smiled and pointed at the tree. How did you do that, Naruto? Naruto couldn't help but feel a bit smug when Ino asked him that. He grinned at her.
My sensei, Anko, showed me how to do it, Naruto explained. It's called the tree climbing technique.
Pretty cool, huh? Ino nodded in agreement.
Yeah, it is, she replied.
Don't you think so, Sakura? It wasn't until Ino said Sakura's name that Naruto was even aware the girl was present. Honestly, the girl could be such a wallflower. Sakura stepped out from Ino's shadow and stared at the tree and then Naruto. Her brow furrowed in thought. Isn't the tree climbing technique a genin level skill? Sakura asked curiously. Why do you know it, Naruto? Naruto told Sakura about Anko, which made her brow furrow even further. I overheard you mention a sensei before, Sakura mused. But I never really thought much about it until now. Why do you already have a sensei? Naruto froze. He wasn't sure how to explain his situation to his classmates. He obviously couldn't tell them about his shadow. The old man and Anko had both told him that he wasn't to discuss the matter with anyone that wasn't already privy to the situation. Sakura was just too inquisitive for her own good. Both girls looked at Naruto suspiciously. Well, you see, the thing is. Naruto stammered, praying to Kami for some kind of deliverance from the now awkward situation. Just drop it, Sakura. Called the voice of Shikamaru Nara, who sauntered over with his friend Chuji Akimichi in tow. Does it really matter that much? Sakura blinked and looked at Ino, who retorted. Aren't you the least bit interested in it, Shikamaru? She asked, crossing her arms. Why does Naruto get a sensei? Shikamaru yawned. No, I'm actually not interested at all, he shrugged. What Naruto does is his own business. Stop being so troublesome. Ino's eye twitched and she rounded on Naruto to demand to know why he had a sensei, only to find that the boy had vanished. She reversed to face Shikamaru again. Where'd he go? She shouted, pointing at Shikamaru, who shrugged again. Beats me, Shikamaru drawled. Come on, Chuji, let's go watch clouds until the bell rings. Chuji, who had yet to say a word, as he was too busy munching on a bag of chips, waved cheerfully at the two girls and followed after his friend. From his spot on the roof of the academy, Naruto chuckled at his clever escape. How's that for diversionary tactics, Irika-sensei? Sarutobi entered the hospital and made his way towards the nurse at the receptionist's desk. He stated his business to the bumbling nurse, who was obviously at a loss for words for addressing the leader of her village, and she directed him to the young girl's room. Upon entering, Sarutobi saw the girl, who was sitting up in her bed, looking out the window. She turned when he entered the room and narrowed her eyes at him suspiciously. Sarutobi held up his hands in a calming gesture. Relax, young one, he began kindly. I'm not going to harm you. The girl continued to watch him warily as he pulled up a chair and placed it at her bedside. Finally she replied. Who are you, then? Sarutobi chuckled. My name is Hiruzen Sarutobi, he answered calmly. But most people refer to me by my title and position. I'm the third Hokage of Konohagakure. The girl blinked, and then her eyes grew wide. I remember hearing that name. She gasped. When those ninja were carrying me, I remember one of them saying something about the Hokage. So that's you? But you're an old man. Sarutobi threw his head back and laughed. He was taken aback by how blunt the girl was, but he found it somewhat charming. Indeed, I am old, Sarutobi chuckled. But I'm still pretty powerful. The girl smiled slightly and then frowned. Those ninjas said that you were going to decide what to do with me. She said warily. You're not going to make me go back, are you? Sarutobi's eyebrows rose.
This young girl must have been in the thick of things if her fear of returning to her home were any indication.
Well now. Sarutobi began uncertainly. I'm sorry, young one, do you think you could tell me your name?
The girl blinked again, and then, in a whisper, replied.
Sasami. Sasami of the Fuma clan.
Sarutobi's eyebrows shot up.
This girl was of the Fuma clan? Even in Konoha, the Fuma clan were well known.
They excelled in handling weapons of all kinds, particularly the Fuma shuriken, which is where the clan probably got their name.
If this girl was one of them, why was she here? Shouldn't she be with her clansmen in the north? Sasami-chan, Sarutobi began genially. May I ask how you ended up here?
From the way Sasami's eyes darkened, Sarutobi could already sense that her story would be tragic.
And tragic it was.
By the time Sasami had finished her tale, she was sobbing uncontrollably. Sarutobi felt his heart break for the young girl. To be so young, and to lose so much, it was horrible.
He swept Sasami up in a gentle embrace. She stiffened at first, but then relaxed into the hug, sobbing into Sarutobi's clothes.
A few minutes later, a red-eyed Sasami calmed down, although one could still hear the occasional sniffle or two.
Sarutobi looked down at Sasami for a few moments and then asked. Sasami-chan, do you have any interest in becoming a citizen of Konoha? You would be safe here, and I'm sure that your father would rather you be safe than in danger?
Sasami's eyes watered at the mention of her father, but she held back the tears with considerable effort and nodded.
Sarutobi smiled gently and then asked another question. How old are you, Sasami-chan?
The girl sniffled, but replied meekly.
I'm 7.
Sarutobi nodded and thought for a moment, suddenly getting an idea of what to do. When you were found, Sasami-chan, he began. You had some kunai pouches on you.
Were you training to become a ninja? Sasami nodded glumly and whispered. And my father was teaching me. I just started a few months ago, but we were making progress.
But now that father is gone, there's no use dash.
What if I told you, interrupted Sarutobi gently, that you could go to the academy here in Konoha to learn how to be a ninja? Sasami's face brightened for the first time since Sarutobi had met her.
It was a heartwarming smile, very much like another 7-year-old he knew.
I would like that a lot. Sasami gushed. Would that mean I would become a ninja that works for you? Sarutobi chuckled and patted Sasami on the head. If you graduate, it does indeed. So what do you say, Sasami-chan? He replied. Sasami's grinned. I'll do it. Danzo stood in his root headquarters staring down at the youth who was kneeling before him. You understand what your mission is? Danzo asked impassively.
The youth nodded. The youth was a boy with pale skin and jet black hair. His eyes were the same color as ink, and his expression was completely neutral.
He wore ANBU-style clothing, with a tanto strapped to his back. Danzo tapped his cane on the floor in an arrhythmic pattern while he thought.
You need a name to use for the duration of your mission, Danzo explained. The boy said nothing, and simply waited.
Then Danzo said. Yes, that will do. Danzo looked down at the boy and smirked.
For this mission and from henceforth, you shall be called Sai. It was early morning when Naruto was shaken awake by someone. Instinctively, he reached for his bedside kunai to defend himself, only to find that he couldn't, his hand was tightly grasped by another. He whipped his head in a panic, only to visibly relax when he noticed that it was just his guardian, Nico.
I admire that you've gotten better with your reaction speed, Naruto-san.
Nico complimented, as she released her grip on Naruto's hand. Naruto gave a large yawn and groggily sat up in his blankets, smiling meekly at her.
Thanks, he said, rubbing the back of his head. But what are you doing here in my bedroom, Nico-san? Nico straightened up and was silent for a moment before she replied. The Hokage wants to see you, Naruto-san.
Naruto turned to look at his battered alarm clock, which read 5:30 in the morning.
Seriously? Naruto groaned. It's still way too early. Besides, I have class to go to. Nico didn't sympathize. You'd better get ready, Naruto-san, she retorted simply. I'll wait outside for you.
Nico didn't even wait for Naruto's reply as she vanished in a quick shunshin. Naruto scowled at the spot Nico had disappeared from.
She sneaks in here, nearly scares me to death, and now I have to go see the old man this early in the morning?
Naruto complained in a whisper.
Why do I get the feeling that today is going to suck? And the best part was, Naruto didn't realize at the time just how right he was. Naruto and Nico made it to the Hokage Tower no less than 30 minutes later.
They would have arrived earlier, but Naruto, in a bout of passive aggressiveness, decided to drag his feet while getting ready. It wasn't until Nico dragged him from his cereal, which Naruto made a point to eat extremely slow, that the boy got his act together and they could leave. Naruto glared as he stomped up the stairs of the tower, Nico following closely behind. He wondered what could possibly be so urgent that the old man needed to see him right now.
Did something happen that the old man thought he needed to know about?
His heart stopped for a moment, and so did his feet.
What if something happened to Anko-sensei? Or Sasuke? Maybe the old man found something out about his mysterious hunter that he needed to tell him immediately?
Nico was slightly startled at the boy's sudden halt and placed a soothing hand on his shoulder.
Is everything all right, Naruto-san? She asked kindly.
Naruto nodded absent-mindedly and continued to walk. Nico continued on as well, but watched the boy with concern.
After what seemed like forever, at least to Naruto, the two of them arrived at the doors to the Hokage's office.
Naruto noticed it was so early in the morning that even Kimiko wasn't even here. Not that he missed the witch. Yet another reason to feel slighted for having to be awake so early. Naruto wouldn't feel so cranky about the situation if Kimiko was forced to buzz him in.
He imagined that would really piss the woman off. Nico opened the door to the office and gestured for Naruto to enter, which he did.
Inside, he was greeted with the sight of Sarutobi, who was staring at him with a very solemn face. The look of the old man's expression made Naruto's heart sink.
"Heya, old man." Naruto greeted uncomfortably.
He had never seen the old man look so cross with him before.
Okay, that wasn't true. The old man had given him the same look when Naruto had gotten caught after doing a prank. The thing was, he hadn't done any pranks lately, so what could the old man possibly be mad about? Sarutobi didn't even smile.
He simply gestured to a lone chair in front of his desk and said,
"Have a seat, Naruto-kun. We need to talk."
Hesitantly, Naruto did as Sarutobi asked and sat. The two of them stared at each other for a moment, before Sarutobi broke the silence. "I know you are aware of your tenant, Naruto-kun," he said simply. Naruto's eyes widened, and he felt his heart rate speed up.
"I am quite upset that you did not come to me when you first learned about the Kyuubi, which also begs the question, how did you come across this knowledge?" Naruto gulped and wrung his hands awkwardly before answering.
"Last year, after the shadow double of Anko appeared and attacked, I found out when I went to sleep that night. I met Kurama, although he was a bit of a jerk at first.
Sarutobi held up a hand to stop the boy. "I assume that's another name for the Kyuubi?" he asked. Naruto shook his head. "No. Kurama is the Kyuubi's real name," Naruto replied. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes.
"Please start from the beginning," he asked sternly.
"I want to know everything. Leave nothing out, Naruto-kun." And so, Naruto explained.
He told the old man about meeting his shadow in his mindscape, after learning about his status as a Jinchuriki from Kurama. He also told him about the time that Kurama had told him his real name. And finally, he told Sarutobi about the fact that he had told Anko about his awareness about being a Jinchuriki, which shook the old man a bit. Sarutobi closed his eyes for a moment, thinking deeply. "I can't believe Anko-chan knew and didn't say anything to me," Sarutobi thought incredulously. That could be considered a treasonous act, but thankfully I completely understand why she didn't.
Sarutobi glanced at Naruto, who was returning his glance, with a large amount of discomfort and shame. Sarutobi smiled slightly. I guess the boy has really grown on you, Anko-chan?
He then cleared his throat and stared at Naruto impassively.
While I am quite upset that you kept this a secret from me, Naruto-kun, the past is the past, we cannot change it. Sarutobi began plainly. Naruto sighed and nodded his understanding. However, continued Sarutobi, now that I know about your awareness, certain steps must be taken to ensure your safety. I do not doubt that several eyes will be on you now, since I had to inform several others about this matter. Naruto's eyes widened in fright. What? He bellowed, jumping to his feet. Old man! Why dash? Sarutobi fixed Naruto with a pointed glance, making the boy once again retake his seat. I am Hokage, Naruto-kun, Sarutobi explained. That means I must think of the best interests of the village, not just individuals. Your status is a matter of military importance, although it irks me to say it like that. Therefore, certain parties had to be made privy to the situation, for safety of the village to be ensured. Naruto hung his head dejectedly. Sarutobi sighed and added. The only people that were informed were those that already know your status as a Jinchuriki. You do not have to worry about anyone close to you finding out, especially your friend Sasuke. There is a law in place that forbids the people who know of your condition from telling anyone who does not already know about you. Naruto looked up and frowned. Well, that's good, I guess, Naruto muttered. But it's not like the law helped me though. Kids my age still avoid and make fun of me. Sarutobi sighed. I suspect many have tried to skirt around my law by passing on their prejudices to their children, seeing that they cannot tell them why they are wary of you. Naruto scowled and crossed his arms. It's not like I asked to be a Jinchuriki. Naruto spat bitterly. I know, Naruto-kun, Sarutobi commiserated. I hate the fact that the villagers cannot see you for who you truly are and not just what you contain. Fuinjutsu is a very complex art, therefore, there are very few that truly understand how it works. The villagers, who have no knowledge of Fuinjutsu whatsoever, don't understand, and fear you because of this. Naruto's eyes blazed. Then I'll just have to show them that I'm not Kurama, and I'm my own person. Naruto declared boldly. Sarutobi smiled warmly at the boy's declaration. I look forward to the day when the village sees you for who you truly are, Naruto-kun. Naruto gave Sarutobi an ear-splitting smile. The old Hokage cleared his throat, obviously trying to keep himself from getting too emotional, and continued. But for now, let's talk about what steps we need to take now that we're both on the same page. Naruto groaned. What steps are those, old man? Sarutobi chuckled at the boy's attitude. Firstly, we'll have to step up your chakra control training, again, he elucidated. Secondly, I'm going to have a student of mine examine your seal to make sure nothing is wrong with it. I've already sent for him, so he should be arriving in the village in a few days. Thirdly, I'm going to assign a small squad of ANBU to shadow you. Sarutobi held up a hand to forestall the indignant response he knew would come from the boy's mouth and continued. Just for a while to make sure no one tries to harm you. Simply think of them the same way you think of Nico over there. The old Hokage pointed at Nico, who stood next to the office door, and waved cheerfully at Naruto. In fact, I'm sure Nico would be delighted to be a part of the squad to watch you. Sarutobi added, looking at the violet-haired ANBU, who nodded. It would be my pleasure, Hokage-sama. She replied. Sarutobi nodded gratefully and focused back on Naruto, who still looked grumpy about the situation, but slightly more mollified than before. Are these terms acceptable with you, Naruto-kun? He asked. Naruto blew out a breath and nodded, making Sarutobi smile. Very good. He exclaimed. I'll work out the specifics later today. For now, I believe you should go and get ready for the academy. Naruto's eyes widened. What? Naruto whined in disbelief. I still have to go. Sarutobi nodded flatly, making Naruto pout. This sucks. Naruto spat.
Sarutobi simply chuckled and gestured to Nico, who came over.
Would you be so kind as to escort our young friend back to his apartment, Nico? He asked. Nico nodded, and began to approach Naruto, who paled. No. No thanks. Naruto stammered. I'll walk. I hate that Shunshin thing.
And with that, Naruto Uzumaki bolted out of the office, without even saying goodbye to a now laughing Sarutobi, who thought,
I bet Minato would be rather upset to hear that Naruto-kun isn't a fan of speedy techniques if he was still alive.
Finishing the thought, Sarutobi looked over at the framed portraits of the previous Hokage that hung on the wall and focused on one in particular.
A man whose son was almost his exact likeness, the fourth Hokage, Minato Namake's. I will do as I promised, old friend, Sarutobi whispered under his breath. I will do everything I can to protect your son.
Sasami awoke in her hospital bed feeling rather refreshed, compared to how she felt the day before. All of her aches were gone, except for her right ankle, where she had tripped yesterday. The nurse who had checked in on her last night after the Hokage had left had informed her that it was sprained, and that it should heal up as long as she took it easy. She was also informed that she was now a citizen of Konoha, which she had mixed feelings about. It wasn't that she wasn't glad to have a new home.
It wasn't that at all.
In fact, she was elated. But, the fact remained that she was still alone. Now, she was alone in a whole village of strangers. She knew the nurse and the Hokage now, of course, but she harbored no delusions that she would be able to talk with them all the time. She was told that she would be released from the hospital today by the Hokage and that he would send someone to escort her to the academy. The thought terrified her. Things were moving a bit too fast for her.
Sasami thought of what her father would say.
Change is always scary at first, he had told her once, while they trained outside their small home in the land of rice. But it is the way the world works. Better to go with the change than fight it. The thought of her father sent a strong pang of sadness through her. It had only been a day since she lost him, but it felt like years had already passed. She knew he would want her to be strong, he would want her to persevere. But, she wasn't sure she could. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard someone shouting in the hall.
No, I don't have an appointment, cried an indignant voice.
Sasami could tell by the tone that whomever it was, the voice belonged to a female.
The Hokage sent me to pick someone up.
Get out of my way, or I'll sick my snakes on you. There was a crash and a yelp, and the door to her room flew open, revealing a strange woman. She had purple hair that was tied back in a ponytail, and long bangs that covered the front of her forehead, concealing a Konoha forehead protector underneath. She wore a fitted mesh bodysuit that stretched from her neck all the way to her thighs, and an orange mini skirt. On top of the mesh, she wore a long beige overcoat. The woman strode into the room and glanced down at Sasami, making the girl recoil slightly. She wasn't sure why, but something told her to be extremely wary of this woman. So, the woman began with an appraising tone. You're the brat that I've got to escort to the academy, eh?
Sasami nodded quickly and attempted to hide herself under her blankets.
The woman chuckled and shook her head.
Don't worry, the woman continued. I'm not going to bite. Sasami lowered her blankets, but still remained on guard.
The woman sighed as she ran a hand through her violet locks.
My name is Anko Mitarashi, she said, introducing herself. What's your name, girlie? Sasami hesitated for a moment, but then replied. Sasami. Sasami Fuma. Anko's eyebrows rose slightly. Fuma, eh? She said, sounding impressed. So you're from the Fuma clan? When Sasami nodded, Anko beamed. Well, Sasami-chan, let's get going. Sasami looked at her blankly, which made Anko sweat drop. What? Anko asked flatly.
Sasami pointed to the foredrip that was still inserted in her arm and gestured at the fact that she was still in hospital attire.
Anko frowned. Right. Anko said with an awkward chuckle. We should probably get a doctor to release you first, huh? Sasami couldn't help but wonder what the Hokage was thinking, sending, in her opinion, the strangest person she had ever met. It was going to be a very interesting day. Sasuke scowled as he made his way to the academy. He couldn't stop thinking about the argument he had witnessed last night between his parents. Flashback, last night. Sasuke awoke from his sleep after hearing the muffled sounds of shouting. He stealthily slipped out of his bedroom, making sure to be as quiet as possible. He crept down the dark hallways of his home and rounded a corner as he followed the source of the sound. He stopped abruptly after he passed the corner and pressed himself against the wall. The sound was coming from his parents' bedroom. As quietly as he could possibly move, he snuck up to the door, where a stream of light flooded out. Apparently both his mother and father were still awake, and from what he could hear, it sounded like they were fighting. Fugaku, it's madness. Came the voice of his mother, Mikoto. She was clearly upset. Sasuke scooted closer to the crack in the door so he could hear better. I won't take any part in it. Mikoto, came the voice of his father, Fugaku. It's in the best interests of the clan. Sasuke lay against the floor perplexed. What in the world were they arguing about? The best interests of the clan, retorted Mikoto angrily. Are you honestly trying to sell that line to me? Think about what it would mean for our children. That got Sasuke's attention. Whatever they were arguing about obviously involved him in some way. He listened more closely. I am thinking about our sons. Fugaku argued back. It's foolishness to think that we'll ever prosper in a village that restrains us at every turn. The Uchiha are no one's servants. Sasuke wasn't surprised by his father's statement. Fugaku Uchiha was a very proud man. And he was even prouder of his clan. Fugaku was the head of the Konoha military police that consisted solely of Uchiha clansmen. He also was the head of the clan, therefore, the man lived and breathed everything that had to do with its inner workings. We are part of the leaf, Fugaku, replied Mikoto. We are not servants, but mutual contributors. No one is calling our clan servants. You aren't in the council meetings, Mikoto. Shot back Fugaku angrily. You don't hear what the others whisper behind our backs when they think no one is listening. They still hold us accountable for the attack 7 years ago. Sasuke felt his confusion rising. 7 years ago? Then that would mean several of us fought the Kyuubi. Mikoto reasoned. Why the rest of the village is suspicious of us, I don't know, but what you're proposing we do about it is still madness. Sasuke almost gasped out loud, but luckily held it in. The village thought the Uchiha were responsible for the Kyuubi's attack? Why? My plan is the only way the Uchiha will ever be on top again. Fugaku raged. Most of the clan agrees with me. Sasuke heard his mother snort with derision. Most of the clan doesn't attend your secret meetings, Mikoto hissed. You, the elders, and a few of the younger clansmen are the only ones who want to go forward with it. Think of all of the Uchiha who want no part in it. What gives you the right to decide their fates? I am the head of the clan. Fugaku shouted so loudly, Sasuke flinched at the harshness of his tone. Apparently, his mother wasn't as intimidated. And the head of a clan should seek the approval of everyone in it, not the approval of a few. Sasuke's head was spinning. What was it that his father was planning? He could clearly hear his father's footsteps as he paced the room. This is happening whether you support it or not, Fugaku hissed with finality. What's concerning me is if I can trust you to keep quiet about it. I am your wife, whispered Mikoto in a dangerous tone that Sasuke had never heard her use. It made the hairs on his neck stand up in alarm. I will keep your secrets, even if I don't approve of them. I will stand by your choices, even if they're wrong. Sasuke heard his father take a deep breath and exhale.
I'm sorry for accusing you, Fugaku said softly.
It's just that I'm stressed. Itachi has been acting very strange as of late, and I'm afraid that his blind loyalty to the village will ruin things.
Not to mention Sarutobi is onto us, I believe.
He might be influencing Itachi.
Sasuke heard his mother walk softly over to where he assumed his father was standing.
Itachi is complicated, dear, Makoto consoled. He's always been that way, even as a child.
But he is an adult, as much as it pains me to think of him as such, he's so young.
He's been an adult ever since he got his forehead protector. You can't force him to do as you ask, that will only drive him away. Fugaku sighed in irritation. I know, he muttered. I just hope he doesn't forget where his loyalties lie. When we start the rebellion, I don't want to have to face my own son.
Sasuke froze, and then promptly sidled away from his parents' bedroom.
His father was planning to rebel against Konoha.
He felt his world start to slowly corrode around him.
He didn't understand. What would make his father think that a rebellion would help the Uchiha? His mother was right, it was madness. Sasuke walked back to his bedroom in a daze.
He couldn't even remember sliding open his door, nor crawling into his bed.
He lay awake looking out his window blankly. A rebellion. That was what was going on with the clan. That was why everyone was acting so strangely. But it begged the question, where did he stand in all of this? He had no desire to go to war with Konoha. It was his home. What would he do if his father forced him to assist in the conflict? Could he? He dismissed the thought. Of course he couldn't. He would never attempt to do such a thing.
He had a best friend in Naruto, and as much as the other students in his class annoyed him, they were still people he had come to care about somewhat. Then there were all the villagers that were kind to him as he walked around the village, people that wouldn't be able to defend themselves if the Uchiha planned a coup. There was absolutely no way he could ever lift a finger against them. Sasuke rolled over in his blankets and stared despondently at the dark ceiling of his bedroom, and the horrible truth of the matter washed over him like a bucket of cold water. The rebellion was going to happen.
And the worst part? There was nothing he could do about it. End flashback.
The sheer thought of what his father was planning to do, and his own helplessness in the situation ate at Sasuke as he trudged down the street.
What could he do? He held no real sway over his father, unlike Itachi.
Sasuke was sure that if Itachi were to talk to their father, he would at least hear him out, even if he dismissed his argument completely.
Sasuke gritted his teeth as he continued walking. Itachi was always their father's favorite. He was a prodigy, everyone said so, and Sasuke couldn't deny the fact. His older brother was only 13, and was already an ANBU captain.
Of course, Sasuke had just started the academy, but even that served as a reminder of how outclassed he was in comparison to Itachi.
Itachi had managed to graduate from the academy when he was the same age Sasuke was right now. Sasuke loved his older brother though. He was always kind and considerate of his feelings. Secretly, Sasuke wished that his father and brother's personalities were swapped.
He could deal with having an overly proud, condescending older brother if he had a loving and supportive father in exchange. All Sasuke wanted was for his father to hold him in the same esteem that he held Itachi.
Was it so much to ask? Sasuke's brooding was interrupted when he heard a familiar voice call out to him. "Hey duck butt!" shouted the voice of Naruto Uzumaki. "Wait up!" Sasuke wheeled around to see his best friend sprinting up the road to meet him.
Sasuke shoved his hands in his pockets and shelved his thoughts for another time. It wouldn't do to get Naruto concerned about him.
Besides, what could the whiskered boy do to help? Better to act like nothing was wrong. "Hurry up then, Whiskers!" Sasuke shouted back, forcing a smile. Naruto caught up to Sasuke and shot him an enormous grin. "Whiskers, huh?" Naruto asked incredulously. "Is that really the best you could come up with?" Sasuke shrugged.
"It seemed like a good insult at the time," he retorted.
Besides, my hair does not look like a duck's but. Naruto snorted, obviously in disagreement. Have you looked at in the mirror? Naruto asked innocently. Sasuke swung a playful fist at Naruto's head, which the boy easily ducked under, and they both laughed. They continued walking down the road towards the academy. Sasuke pretended to listen as Naruto ranted about one thing or another, but truthfully his mind kept flashing back on the conversation he heard last night. He glanced over at his friend who was pantomiming an explosion of some sort and smirked. Rebellion or not, Sasuke thought as they rounded a bend to be met with the facade of the academy building. Konoha is my home. I'm not going to fight my friends. Itachi hung his head as he wandered the streets of the village, lost in thought. He had just come from a meeting a few minutes ago with the Hokage and his advisors concerning his clan. The Hokage, whom Itachi respected greatly, had argued in vain against his advisors and Danzo that they should continue trying to reach out and find a diplomatic solution. Danzo, on the other hand, argued that the Uchiha had made it clear that they would not make any more concessions, and grew worse and worse by the day. Itachi gritted his teeth throughout the whole meeting. They spoke as if he wasn't even present. It was his clan they were discussing, his family. Finally, Sarutobi had asked him for his report on the matter. Itachi had reported that his father intended on going through with his plans of staging a rebellion and planned to finalize the attack plans tonight. That shocked everyone, except Danzo, who Itachi noticed almost seemed pleased. Itachi hated the man almost as much as he detested his father's blind allegiance to the Uchiha clan and not the village as a whole. Both men claimed to only want the best for the clan or village respectively, but they were so wrapped up in their own agendas they couldn't see the whole picture. For his father, Itachi had constantly reasoned that a shinobi's allegiance should be to their village first and clan second. Obviously, his father vehemently argued against his logic. Danzo, on the other hand, was wrapped up in so much secrecy Itachi couldn't be sure of what the man's true intentions towards Konoha even were. Itachi sighed as he continued his aimless stroll. In the end, the Hokage had decreed that Itachi was to attend the meeting his father would be holding tonight and report back immediately after with a report about his plans. It made Itachi feel ill just thinking about it. Although the Hokage hadn't said it, he was basically implying that the Uchiha would have to be dealt with accordingly depending on what was decided at the meeting. Itachi wished there was another way. There had to be. He knew which side of the conflict he would be though, and it wouldn't make his father happy, not that he cared. Itachi had stopped caring about his father's opinion of him ever since he had made him into the poster boy of the Uchiha clan, a position he detested. His father, so full of Uchiha pride, was completely blinded by his own delusions of grandeur of what the clan could be if they simply took what they believed was their right. He looked at Itachi as if he was their guiding light, an example of what all Uchiha shinobi should strive to be. That wouldn't be so bad, in Itachi's opinion, if his father was talking about what drove Itachi to work as hard as he did to get where he was, but he knew his father was only referring to his prodigious skills. It was shallow, and completely irrelevant in Itachi's opinion. A shinobi shouldn't be judged by his skills, he should be judged by his character. Even more than that, they should be recognized for what they stand for what they fight for. Itachi didn't have to wonder what he fought for. He had known ever since he got his headband as a genin. He fought for his family, especially his younger brother, Sasuke, but most importantly, he fought for his village. Sai crouched on a rooftop overlooking the academy across the way. He observed with sharp eyes each and every student that entered the building. The way they carried themselves, the way they talked with one another, all of it was imperative, if he was to fulfill his mission. He was honored that Lord Danzo had trusted this assignment to him. He couldn't remember his life before Root, and was sure that he didn't care to. All that mattered was enforcing Lord Danzo's will. He was proud to serve. Lord Danzo had given him a purpose. He would be nothing but a nameless, weak orphan wandering the streets of the village if Lord Danzo hadn't discovered and taken him in. He had regrets, however. As much as Lord Danzo preached that a true shinobi had to purge themselves of all emotion, Sai still had a few that constantly festered under his stoic facade. He tried desperately to rid himself of them,
to become the shinobi that Lord Danzo wanted him to be, but they still remained, like a scar that would never fade. It was his last test to truly join the ranks of Root that had caused them to resurface. He was given a final test, a test that would effectively purge him of all emotion, all attachments. At first, Sai was all too eager to prove himself worthy by any means possible. There was nothing he wouldn't do to become a true shinobi. But then his world had come crashing down around him when he was given the test. A simple battle, no holds barred. It seemed easy enough, after all of the arduous training he had completely before. Just a fight? No problem. But when he saw who he was to fight to the death, Sai shook his head of the thought. Now was not the time to reflect on the past. There was only the present. Only his mission. He made his way off of the building and slipped into an alleyway and emerged, joining the throng of children his age as they conversed and entered the academy. They were all so oblivious, so carefree, he thought as he listened in on various conversations as he moved forward with the crowd. These children aspired to be ninja? Laughable. There was no place for such innocence if one wanted to become a true ninja. Once again, Sai forced his thoughts back into the recesses of his mind. He reminded himself that he was here for a reason. He was here to accomplish his mission. Nothing else mattered. Obito Uchiha was irritated. And that was not a good thing. He was irritated because his well-thought-out plans were just derailed by what can only be called an enigma of a person. He cursed under his breath. He had planned to sneak into Konoha and finish what he had started by planting the seeds of rebellion in the minds of his fellow clansmen, the Uchiha. It was supposed to be cut and dry, but that person had to appear and ruin everything. Flashback, last night. Obito grinned as he quietly slipped away from a meeting in the Hokage's tower. He had eavesdropped on a top-secret discussion about what to do about the impending rebellion of the Uchiha clan. He watched with ill-disguised mirth as the Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, tried and failed to convince his advisors to continue to take a diplomatic approach to the situation. The old fool. Obito thought. Doesn't he realize that it's pointless? He also watched with satisfaction as his fellow clansman, Itachi, tried to remain completely indifferent throughout the discussion about his family. Obito knew the boy must be torn inside, listening helplessly as the fate of his clan was argued over in committee. Itachi's indecision was key to his plans. The more helpless he felt, the better. Obito made his way to the forests outside Konoha's walls, where he was to rendezvous with Zetsu, who was currently spying on the Uchiha clan's head, Fugaku. After several long minutes, the plant-like man appeared, phasing through the ground silently. Zetsu was Obito's right-hand man. He was also the strangest-looking being that Obito had ever seen. He had a human head with short green hair, and a face that was divided down the middle. One half was white, with a yellow iris, while the other half was completely black, with a yellow eye. He was easily recognizable by the two Venus flytrap extensions that emerged from his sides, enveloping his body like a shell, which he was able to retract and close at will. He wore a plain black cloak and both of his legs were wrapped in bandages. To finish off his attire, he wore black sandals. The white side of his face had a more playful personality, while the black half was much more solemn and blunt. Obito was somewhat unnerved by the man, but he had seen stranger things in his experiences. "What news, Zetsu?" Obito asked. Zetsu was silent for a moment before replying. "Fugaku is going to finalize the rebellion plans tonight," said Zetsu's white half with glee. The other half of Zetsu's body, the black half, added, "The stage is set. Everything is in place." Obito grinned underneath his mask and chuckled. "All that's needed is to convince Itachi to take part in exterminating his clan," Obito said. "And then, we can set our other plans in motion." "Oh, I wouldn't do that if I were you," replied a sweet voice from nearby. Instantly, Obito fell into a defensive stance and activated his Sharingan, trying to pinpoint the intruder's location. "Come out," Obito commanded. There was a pause, and then a woman who Obito recognized stepped into the clearing. "Anko Medarashi?" asked Obito in surprise.
What was she of all people doing here? Wow, replied Anko. I'm flattered. I guess the Sharingan isn't all that it's cut out to be if you think I'm actually the real Anko. Obito narrowed his eye at her. Looking more closely, he noticed that the figure before him was odd. In all respects, it appeared to be Anko Mitarashi, but his Sharingan was picking up a strange fluctuation in her chakra that wasn't normal. It was as if she was there, but not entirely. Who are you, then? Obito hissed dangerously. Anko giggled and then began to melt. Her color faded, and her form elongated and stretched into a humanoid shadow. It had no facial features, just darkness for a face. Who I am isn't really important, but for the sake of conversation, you can call me Kage, said the apparition. Obito snorted derisively underneath his mask in amusement. Shadow, huh? Obito said. What do you want? Kage stretched and tilted its head to side, as if appraising Obito critically. It's not so much what I want, as what my master wants, Kage said casually with a shrug. For example, you aren't going to do anything concerning the Uchiha. Obito was silent for a moment, before he burst into laughter. Are you serious? He cackled disbelievingly. Who did this Kage think it was talking to? I'm Madara Uchiha, patriarch of the Uchiha clan. I can do whatever I wish concerning my clan. Kage didn't say anything for a moment before it shook its head slowly. I think we both know that you're not Madara, Obito, replied Kage simply. Obito felt himself freeze up. How in the world did this thing know who he really was? Then, he realized that it didn't matter. His secret couldn't be revealed. Therefore, this Kage had to be dealt with, now. Obito lunged forward at blinding speed, kunai in hand, hoping to take Kage by surprise. He was momentarily stunned when he discovered that his attack went straight through the shadowy figure, much like his own Kamui technique. Not to be deterred, Obito flashed through a series of hand signs and blew out a stream of flame that surrounded the shadow on all sides. There was a scream of pain, and Obito smirked as he watched his technique deal with the interloper. Just kidding, came the voice of Kage to his right, who was standing completely unharmed next to Zetsu, who aimed a kick at Kage's head, only for it to phase straight through. What in the world are you? Asked Black Zetsu in awe. Kage chuckled as it examined Zetsu in great interest. You know, said Kage gleefully. I could ask you the exact same question. Obito clenched his fists in outrage. Enough of this. He spat. What do you want? Kage turned from Zetsu and looked at Obito. At least, Obito thought Kage was looking at him. I already told you, Kage replied. My master wants you to leave the Uchiha clan alone. He already has plans for them, and you will only complicate them. Obito couldn't believe what he was hearing. He then asked the question that he was dying to know. Who is your master then? He hissed. And why in the world should I give a damn what he wants? Suddenly, like a gentle breeze, a name was whispered into Obito's ear and he froze in disbelief. There's no way. He gasped. Kage chucked and nodded. That's him, Kage replied happily. So unless you want to make him your enemy, I would suggest doing as he asks. Obito fell to his knees in shock. If Kage's master was really who it said it was, then he had no choice but to back off. He couldn't face a foe of that magnitude. Oh, and one more thing, Kage added, making Obito look up at the shadow. Any plans that you have concerning Naruto Uzumaki, forget them. Obito growled, but said nothing. At this rate, everything that he had planned would have to be completely scrapped. Kage began to disappear in a swirl of shadows. That's all. Kage said. Remember what I said, and you probably won't see me again. And with that, Kage vanished completely, leaving no indication that it was ever in the clearing in the first place. There was a poignant silence that lasted several minutes before White Zetsu asked. What do we do, boss? Obito took several deep breaths before he stood up and adjusted his mask.
We do nothing as of right now, Obito said bitterly.
I'm not match for that man. In fact, I don't even think Madara could face him in a battle. We'll have to scrap our plans for the Uchiha. Zetsu nodded and then added. What of the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki then? Asked Black Zetsu curiously. We need it to complete our ultimate goal, are we going to leave it alone as well? Obito said nothing for a moment as he thought about his options.
On the one hand, he could simply try and take the boy now, but from what he had gathered in his time spying on the village, the boy was very well guarded. Also, there was the fact that he would be going against Kage's warning. He didn't want to face the consequences of that just yet. Once he had gathered more to his cause, he might consider going for it, but not at the moment. Then, on the other hand, if he didn't do anything that allowed Kage's master to control the playing field, which Obito couldn't have happened. I'll have to think about it more, Obito said at last. We'll complete the Moon's Eye plan one way or another, regardless of that man's influence or not.
Zetsu nodded silently in understanding. Obito activated his Kamui and swirled out of sight, Zetsu soon phasing into the ground after. End flashback. Obito was at a loss for what to do now.
If he acted without thinking things through, everything that he worked so hard to put in place could come falling down all around him.
He needed to be patient. And he also needed to find an advantage over his new enemy. The question was, how? Naruto yawned loudly as he sat in his seat. He was still tired from having to wake up so early to meet with the old man. He was glad that they discussed the matter of Kurama, however. One of the many things that was bothering him was the fact that he had kept it a secret from him for so long. He trusted the old man completely, and couldn't find it in him to be mad at the old man for not telling him that he was a Jinchuriki. Sure, he was upset at the time it was discussed, but now that he had some time to think it over, he realized that he was right to keep it a secret. If Naruto hadn't met Kurama when he did, and still remained oblivious to the matter, being told about it would have completely destroyed him. He would have been happy to know why the villagers treated him the way they did, but at the same time, he would be completely at a loss as to how to deal with the information. Luckily, he had Kurama, Anko, and now the old man as support, even if the former didn't really count, because he was the one being discussed. Naruto chanced to glance at Sasuke to see him brooding even more than usual. He had a good mind to ask his friend what was wrong earlier, as no one knew how to throw up a mask better than he did. Naruto was able to easily see that on their walk to class, Sasuke was forcing himself to smile. It was obvious that something was eating at Sasuke, but Naruto remembered his promise to himself not to pry unless Sasuke talked about it first. Naruto's thoughts were interrupted when he noticed Irika walk into the room and stand at the podium. Naruto plugged his ears, as he already knew what was surely coming in the next few seconds. And come it did. Even with his fingers muffling the sound, Naruto could still clearly hear Irika command the class to shut up and sit down. Naruto waited until Irika's head returned to its normal size before taking his fingers out of his ears. Irika cleared his throat and then addressed the class. Today, we have 2 new students joining us, he began, to the delight and curious of many in the room. Naruto groaned at all of the chatter. He knew that Irika was most likely about to go big head again at any moment. Surprisingly, Irika didn't. Okay, settle down. Irika yelled as he walked over to the door. I hope that you will treat your new classmates kindly and help them adjust. You both can come in now. Sasami was dropped off at the academy by Anko, who insisted on taking her time strolling through the streets, instead of transporting the both of them via Shunshin. This was fine with Sasami, however. She didn't mind getting to get her real first look at Konoha, although the nagging soreness of her ankle was getting on her nerves. She currently was wearing the same outfit that she was found in. Her nurse at the hospital had washed her clothes and folded them on a dresser in the hospital room, and Anko commented how glad she was that she didn't have to dip into her dango and sake money to buy some brat clothes. Sasami wasn't sure what to make of the woman. Anko was nice enough, if not a tad standoffish.
She was crude and blunt, but Sasami kind of liked that about her. Sasami noticed as they walked down the street that many of the villagers they passed looked at her with curiosity and interest, but when they saw who she was traveling with scowled and quickly turned away.
"Anko-san?" Sasami asked meekly as they strolled down the street. Anko raised an eyebrow to show that she was listening. "Why are people scowling at you? Did you do something wrong?" Anko started to laugh, which greatly surprised Sasami. When Anko calmed down, she replied,
"Kiddo, I haven't done anything wrong," she said with a carefree smile. "The villagers are just a bunch of uptight asswads."
Sasami blinked at Anko's answer and then asked, "Really? Then why dash?"
"Look, kiddo," Anko said, in a more solemn tone. "Let's just say that my sensei was a bit of a bad guy. Therefore, his reputation kind of got passed down to me, even though I'm nothing like him.
Understand?" Sasami nodded. From Anko's tone she understood that it was most likely a touchy subject.
She decided to drop it, and they both continued walking in a somewhat uncomfortable silence. When the two of them arrived at the academy, Sasami noticed that no one was in the schoolyard, which probably meant that classes had already started. She turned to look at Anko.
"Are we late?" she asked in worry. Anko chuckled in response. "Nah," she said, which Sasami could tell was obviously not true. Anko noticed the frown on the young girl's face. "Okay, just a tad, but not by that much." Sasami didn't answer as the two of them walked into the building. Anko led Sasami down a long hallway and up a flight of stairs.
They went halfway down another hallway leading in the opposite direction before they stopped outside a door, where another boy was waiting.
"Who's that?"
whispered Sasami to Anko, who shrugged.
"Beats me," murmured Anko in reply.
"I don't make a habit of learning the names of every brat I run into."
Sasami rolled her eyes at Anko's dismissive answer and observed the boy.
He was fairly tall and had pale skin and eyes that matched his jet black hair. He was dressed in a high-collared midriff shirt, black pants, shinobi sandals and gloves that exposed his index finger and thumb. He had a tanto strapped to his back as well. Sasami's first thought about the boy was how odd he seemed. His face was completely devoid of all emotion. She thought that he would at least be nervous if he was in the same situation as her.
Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was standing out here to greet them? "Hi," said Sasami, taking the initiative. "I'm Sasami Fuma. I'm new to the academy. Who are you?"
The boy turned his eyes on her, and Sasami couldn't repress the thought that he was analyzing her.
"I am Sai," he replied with a smile. "I am also new to the academy. It's nice to meet you." Sasami smiled and nodded, but on the inside, she frowned.
Sai's smile wasn't right.
It was almost as if he didn't know how to really do it. Like he copied the expression from a book. Anko chose that time to speak up.
"Well," she began, stretching.
"Since you two brats seem to be getting along just fine, I'm gonna head out. See you around, kiddo."
She ruffled Sasami's head, which made the girl swat her hand.
Sasami then turned to Anko and bowed. "Thanks for all of your help today, Anko-san," she said politely. Anko waved her off. "Just call me Anko-chan," Anko replied. "Anko-san makes me feel like I'm old or something." Sasami and Anko both laughed. "You do look kind of old though," said Sai, which made Anko stop laughing at once. She narrowed her eyes and took a step closer to the pale boy. "What did you just say, brat?" Anko hissed in growing anger. Sai was completely unaffected. "I said, you do look kind of old. Am I wrong?" Anko snatched Sai by the collar of his shirt and hefted him into the air, much to Sasami's shock. She pulled his face close to hers and snarled. "Listen, kid," she growled venomously. Never talk like that to me again, got it?" Sai said and did nothing except stare impassively back at Anko, which seemed to make her even angrier. Well, Anko snarled, shaking Sai for emphasis.
Much to Sasame's relief, the door to the classroom opened at that moment.
You can both come in now, said a kind voice.
A man stepped out and looked at the scene before him in surprise. His surprise quickly faded and he grabbed Anko's wrist.
Anko-san, he yelled. Put him down. Anko flushed pink and set Sai down on the ground.
Sai did nothing to fix his ruffled shirt and just stared at the man blankly.
Sorry Irika, Anko said shyly. I got a bit carried away, I guess.
Sasami watched the exchange between the two of them with interest. She didn't know that Anko, who always seemed brash and confident, could possibly have a demure side. The man called Irika sighed and shook his head.
It's fine, Anko-san, he replied.
But, I need to get these two inside and continue with my class.
Anko blushed again and laughed nervously. Oh. All right.
She stammered as she scratched the back of her head awkwardly.
Your class. I'll just be going now. Anko vanished in a swirl of leaves, leaving Sasami, Sai, and Irika standing in the hallway. Irika smiled at the two of them. Come on in, you two,
he said kindly, gesturing at the open classroom door. Sai strode forward at once into the classroom, whereas Sasami hesitated for a moment before following after him. The first thing Sasami noticed when she walked into the classroom was all of the various pairs of eyes that were fixed on her as she strode over to the podium where Irika was waiting. It made her extremely uncomfortable, and she would have given anything to be able to vanish in a shunshin like Anko had done only moments ago. She chanced to look at Sai, who was regarding everyone in the class curiously, without the slightest bit of discomfort.
Sasami's thoughts were stirred when Irika spoke up. All right, he said. Why don't you two introduce yourselves? Just your names will do. Sasami let out a barely visible sigh of relief. She was thankful that Irika wasn't asking them to say more.
She was so nervous she was positive that she'd simply stumble over her words.
I am Sai, said Sai simply. Nice to meet all of you.
Sai did his creepy smile thing again, and it was all Sasami could do not to shudder.
Something about that boy really put her off. Sasami blinked when she noticed that everyone, including Sai, was now focused on her.
She blushed, hating herself for getting distracted, and introduced herself.
My name is Sasami Fuma, she said meekly.
She wanted to kick herself for fumbling over her words.
Irika smiled and nodded. All right, you two, he said. Find an open seat and sit down. Don't worry about your books for now, just share with someone.
Sasami made her way up the stairs, very aware of everyone watching her and Sai as they did so. She passed a feral-looking boy who had an open seat by him, but after she witnessed him growl at Sai, decided not to sit there. Finally, she found an open seat near the back where two boys were sitting. One had his head down on the desk lazily, while the other boy was glancing out the window indifferently. They seemed okay, so Sasami tried her luck.
Hey, she began.
Both boys turned to look at her, making her blush slightly.
Do you mind if I sit here?
The boy who was looking out the window just grunted and resumed looking out the window again. Sasami wasn't sure what that meant, so she looked down at the other boy who turned to look at her. He had spiky yellow hair and bright cerulean-colored eyes. For some odd reason, he had what appeared to look like 3 whisker marks on either cheek. He was dressed in an orange V-neck shirt, with a black vest over it. His arms were covered in wrappings that started at his elbows and went all the way down to his hands, that were covered with black shinobi-style gloves.
He wore black pants and matching shinobi sandals.
The boy grinned widely at her, and she was surprised by how happy he seemed to be. Sure, the boy cried loudly, making Sasami wince slightly.
The more the merrier. Right, Sasuke. The boy named Sasuke simply grunted again, not even bothering to look at them.
The blonde boy turned back to Sasami and grinned again.
That means, yes in Sasuke, he said cheerfully. I'm Naruto, by the way. Naruto Uzumaki. Sasami nodded as she took a seat next to Naruto, who gestured to Sasuke with a thumb. The broody kid over there is my friend, Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto continued as he scowled at him. Don't worry about him. He'll warm up to you once he gets to know you. Well, as long as you don't become one of his fangirls. Before Sasami could respond or even ask what a fangirl was, Iruka yelled at them. Quiet down, Naruto, he admonished. I'm trying to teach a lesson here. Naruto stuck his tongue out at Iruka in return, which made Sasami giggle softly. At the sound of her laughter, Naruto turned to her and grinned. Hey, Sasami-chan. Whispered Naruto. Sasami was a bit taken aback that Naruto was being so familiar with her. After all, she had only just met him seconds ago. But for some reason, she didn't really mind that he called her that. He seemed like the type of person who eschewed formalities, if his bold way of speaking were any indication. What is it? Sasami whispered back. Naruto grabbed her hands and brought his face uncomfortably close to hers and said, Do you want to be friends? Sasami blinked. Firstly, she had never met someone who had such a disregard for people's personal space. But secondly, and more strange to her, she had never heard someone ask such a question with such sincerity and hopefulness. Sasami smiled and nodded. Naruto whooped, only to be yelled at by Iruka again, making Sasami burst into a quiet fit of giggles all over again. She was beginning to think that life in Konoha wouldn't be that bad after all. Sai silently watched the exchange between the new girl Sasami and his target, Naruto Uzumaki. He wasn't sure why Lord Danzo had seemed so interested in the boy. He seemed like a buffoon. He was loud and somewhat obnoxious from what Sai could discern of him. However, none of that mattered. If Lord Danzo wanted him to observe the boy, then that was what Sai would do. He was currently seated next to who he assumed was a civilian girl, who was sneaking furtive glances at him for some reason. He had no idea why this was and turned to look at her, making the girl blush pink. Can I help you with something? Sai asked flatly. The girl shook her head furiously and stammered. And no. Sai nodded blankly at her and continued to observe the class, only to be interrupted by the girl once more, who whispered. I'm Akiko. It's nice to meet you, Sai-san. Sai stared at her for a full 10 seconds before he smiled and nodded. Akiko blushed again and went back to watching Iruka, although Sai caught her continuing to sneak occasional glances at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Sai ignored Akiko in favor of observing his class. It was essential that he become familiar with the children of note here. It would make his mission easier. He noticed a few rows down from him a boy sleeping and snoring softly who had to be a Nara. Naras were known for their laziness, but were also deceptively intelligent. Sai made a mental note to be wary of the boy. Next to the Nara was a chubby boy whom Sai could only assume was an Akimichi. The boy was watching Iruka while munching on a bag of chips. Sai turned his attention to the bottom of the classroom, where he noticed a girl with long platinum blonde hair who was listening to the teacher's lecture in obvious boredom. Sai supposed she was a Yamanaka, the clan that was known for being able to use mind jutsu. Sai knew of only one other Yamanaka, his mentor in root training, Fu. However, unlike Fu, who was a model example of what a shinobi should strive to be, this Yamanaka girl clearly wasn't interested in taking the path of a shinobi seriously. Sai observed from her flashy dress style that she must be one of those types of girls that care more about their appearance than their aptitude in the ninja arts. Sai moved his focus to the girl seated next to her and blinked twice, as if his eyes were deceiving him. Did that girl have pink hair? It made him wonder what the girl possibly hoped to accomplish in her career with such a blatant hair color. How would she possibly be able to move stealthily when her enemies could see her coming from a mile away? Sai's thoughts were once again interrupted by Akiko, who tapped him on the shoulder. He turned to look at her again, only to watch as her face took on a rosy hue once more. How very strange. Sai thought. He wondered why she kept reacting this way. He would have to read up on female body language when he got a chance. Yes? Asked Sai flatly. Akiko demurely pushed her Konoha history textbook towards him.
Why, you can share my textbook if you want. She whispered, averting her eyes from him. Sai stared at Akiko again for another long span of time before replying.
Thank you. Akiko beamed. Akiko nodded and smiled brightly at him. Sai gave a smile in return, but quickly went back to observing the classroom again.
He turned slightly in his chair to scout out other key students.
He noticed a feral-looking boy that he easily identified as an Inuzuka. He knew this already, however.
The boy had growled at him as he ascended the stairs, obviously trying to assert himself as an alpha. Sai moved on from the Inuzuka boy and noticed two more students of note sitting near the very back of the classroom. There was a boy wearing sunglasses and a collar-high jacket, and a smaller girl with white eyes and blue hair. He immediately recognized both as being an Aburame and Hyuga respectively. While he wasn't sure of the Aburame, he was positive that the Hyuga girl must be of the main house of her clan, since she did not have a seal on her forehead. Sai mentally noted that as something to look into further. There were not any Hyuga en route, although Sai knew that Lord Danzo was very interested in recruiting one. Perhaps if Sai played his cards right, he might be able to convince this girl to meet with his master. The Aburame boy turned his head to stare directly at Sai. Apparently, he kept his gaze on the two of them long enough to be noticed. Sai smiled at him and quickly looked elsewhere.
His eyes finally rested on his target again, Naruto Uzumaki.
Glancing past the blonde-haired boy, who was currently whispering something to the new girl, Sasami, Sai suddenly noticed the boy who was glancing out the window, and almost kicked himself for almost missing him. The boy was of the Uchiha clan. Sai did not have to speculate upon this, as the fan emblem on the back of the boy's shirt made this fact glaringly obvious. The Uchiha were another clan that Lord Danzo was immensely interested in. Sai knew the reason why, of course. Lord Danzo was interested in obtaining a shinobi capable of using the famed eyes of the Uchiha, the Sharingan. Sai was well versed in the workings of the eye thanks to Lord Danzo's instruction, but assumed the Uchiha boy in his class had yet to awaken his. He made a mental note to watch the Uchiha carefully. If the boy was to unlock his Sharingan while at the academy, he might very well be a prime candidate to join Root.
Sai! Called the voice of Ireka. Sai turned his attention away from the Uchiha boy and stared impassively down at Ireka, who was scowling. Please stop daydreaming and pay attention, please. There was an outburst of laughter that Sai ignored, mostly because he did not understand what was so funny. He was just reprimanded, was he not? Why would that be a source of humor to others? Sai frowned as he took up Akiko on her offer to share a textbook, so he could pay attention. His first day of his mission left him with only one thought. He had a lot of reading about normal human interactions to do after class. Itachi sat on a dock overlooking a lake in the Uchiha district. It held a lot of sentimental value to him, as it was the place where he had learned his first fire jutsu, the Gokakyu no Jutsu, Great Fireball technique. It was also where he and his younger brother would spend a lot of time together, simply talking. The thought of Sasuke filled Itachi with sadness. He had gone to the secret meeting his father had held last night and his worst fears were confirmed. The Uchiha would be staging a revolt. Naturally, he went to the Hokage immediately after the meeting and informed of such. To say Sarutobi was disappointed by the end decision was an understatement. Itachi respected the third so much because the man hated violence, just as he did. He would much rather try and settle things peacefully than use force. That was what separated Sarutobi and Danzo. Speaking of Danzo, Itachi had been pulled aside by the mummified man and asked to do a top-secret mission for him. Danzo had tried to convince Itachi that the uprising could be stopped, and at a smaller cost of Uchiha and Konoha ninja lives, if Itachi would lead a root contingent into the Uchiha district under the cover of darkness, and assassinate the ones involved. Itachi had staunchly refused Danzo's idea. He was not so desperate about the situation to go behind his actual leader's back. On top of that, Itachi didn't trust Danzo one bit. He sensed some form of duplicity in the man's actions. Danzo was not someone who normally cared about saving lives, he was ruthless.
That only made Itachi feel even more justified at turning the man's offer down. But the fact remained that the coup was still set to happen. Itachi's father had set the date for the revolt in 3 days. That gave the Hokage and his advisors plenty of time to set up a counter, of course, but Itachi felt as if he was the linchpin of the whole situation. His father had become more aggressive as of late, demanding to know if Itachi planned to side with him or not. Itachi had declared that his father should already know which side he was on, and things between the two of them had gotten even more tense. Itachi sighed again and glanced up at the clear blue sky. He smiled as a crow flew by overhead. He had always liked those birds.
"I thought I would find you here," said a soft voice from behind him. Itachi didn't have to look to know it was his mother, Makoto. "Hello, mother," Itachi replied softly, continuing to gaze at the sky. Makoto walked over and sat next to her son and regarded him with concern. "Are you all right, Itachi?" she asked, fixing her gaze on his face. Itachi sighed and returned her gaze. His mother was so beautiful. He wished he took more after her than his father in terms of looks. "I'm just stressed," Itachi said at last. Makoto frowned. "Itachi," she began sternly. "I can tell that it's more than that. You're worried about what your father is planning, aren't you?" Itachi lowered his gaze. "Of course I am," he replied quietly. "Doesn't father understand that he's making a terrible mistake? Are the lives of our clansmen, our status as Konoha citizens, nothing to him?" Makoto reached out a hand and gently raised Itachi's face so their eyes met. "Itachi, your father is doing what he thinks is best for the clan," she said with obvious displeasure. "What's important is what you think is best for the clan. You are the heir after all." Itachi narrowed his eyes at his now smiling mother. "Mother, what are you hinting at?" said Itachi slowly. Makoto continued to smile at him before she replied. "I know of a way that we can stop the coup before it even happens." Itachi's eyes widened, and he felt like he was just hit point blank by one of Guy's punches. Of course. The answer was right in front of him the whole time. How could he have missed it? Makoto's face lit up in delight when she saw that her eldest